Chapter 64. During the construction of Dwarnaland, some clever soul had figured out that, with the aid of a 150-kilometre-long dike built alongside the shallow sunken coastline of a former atoll, they could manipulate the oscillation of water passing through the channel they'd created. The movement of water from one end of the V-shaped trap to the other coincided exactly with the tides, reinforcing the sloshing motion of the substantial body of water. So that twice a day, at the shallow, narrow end of the V, there was an enormous tidal range, and vast expanses of the seabed were exposed. This intertidal zone, over 100 kilometres square, was named a perigon, and boasted one of the most exclusive conference suites in the world. Ray descended the last few steps that led down the levee behind her and walked out onto a paved walkway. The paving was slippery in places, where seaweed and moss had formed on the stone. "All right, you may have had a point," she said out loud. There was no response. "Yes, okay, I do like him," she tried again. "But you understand where I was coming from, right? The board, this session, the stakes are high. I didn't want to get distracted." Nothing but the sound of the wind blowing strands of her hair against her cheek. The first of the statues was set by the side of the pathway. It was like the ones Ray had seen from the bedroom of her seahorse villa, but for the time being wasn't submerged. Carved from white stone fringed with green algae, the sculpture depicted a girl sat cross-legged in a circle of rocks, playing with a toy on the floor. "Fine. Be like that then." She booted a loose pebble off the path. It made a trail in the sand before skidding to a halt a few metres away. "Suits me, fine." The approach to the domed conference centre wound around some modest contours of the seabed, where more and more sculptures were set in amongst the rocks. Life-size figures stood, sat, lay, and danced around the glass hemisphere in all manner of poses and positions. A ghoulish crowd of sculptured people, maybe 100 distinct figures scattered in a haphazard gathering, some clothed and some topless. A few expressed emotions they couldn't contain, sobbing on their knees or cheering with joy and punching the air. But most of them stood placid and straight-faced, like a throng of commuters on a train platform, wishing they were anywhere but here. All of them showed signs of wear from the waters that covered them twice a day. Shellfish shrouded their bodies in busy swarms, heavy drapes of seaweed bearded their features, and fingers of thermally tolerant coral bubbled up and distorted the smooth curves of their sculptured surface. Ray strode past them all, walking as fast as she could along the raised stone walkway. Time was short, but she didn't want to run. Turning up breathless and sweaty would be worse than being a few minutes late. "I hope you stop playing silly buggers by the time we're in that simulation," she said aloud. "Is your arse on the line here too?" Opening the door to the Perigon Conference Centre, Ray was about to walk in when she noticed a change in the muddy seabed. The surface had become slick and shiny, with a thin layer of water. Looking behind her, Ray saw a series of wide ripples streaming steadily over the ground. "Well, will you look at that?" The voice in her head was flat and menacing. "The tide is turning.